However, we are now going to move and pivot to our panel discussion. We're going to discuss themes that were reflected in the film This Ain't Normal and ways that we can address them through systemic and policy change. Our panelists that I'm about to introduce will explore how effective interventions, including those outside of the system, policies that reduce the collateral consequences of system involvement, and supports for the successful reintegration of young people back into their communities are absolutely essential for their and our community's well-being. So I will now call on our panelists to quickly introduce yourself to our audience and give just a 1 or 2 minute quick reflection on the film clips that we just viewed. So for start, and really quickly, if you want a little backdrop on who our panelists are, there will be links to our program that will be put in the chat where you can also learn a little bit more. So now, to get started, I first want to introduce Trey. Trey, who you just saw in the film, please introduce yourself.
How y'all doing? I'm Trey. I don't know where to start at, so I don't know.
Come on, you got enough room.
Really like where to start.
Hurry up.
As y'all seen the film, we come from poverty, struggle, every day is a different obstacle for us. You know what I'm saying? It's like when things get hard, when people do when things get hard, they go back to what they know. You know what I'm saying? That's the part that's hard to stay away from, going back to what you know. You know that money's hard, not jobs not coming, but you know to do to get money quick. You got kids, family to feed, all type of stuff. You got to eat. You go sell drugs, doing something negative, but for a positive really reason. But it's like you damn as you do and you damn as you don't. So to sum it all up, we're just looking for opportunities, assistance. We don't need no handout. We got our own 2 feet, our own legs, our own hands, our own brain. Put a work in ourselves. You know what I'm saying? But we gotta be put in position. There's people in power, in position of power, not doing what they're in position of power for. It makes no sense. You know what I'm saying? Like, you just gotta keep it 100. You gotta keep it real with it. If y'all not doing your job, so it's no reason that millions of people is starving and millions of people, thousands of people dying every day, and y'all got all this money and it's just sitting there and nothing's happening with it. That's crazy. You know what I'm saying? In the places where it needs to be happening most. Yeah, it's being spent, but not in the right places. You know what I'm saying? So we just need opportunity. You know what I'm saying? We need like trade programs. There's no trade programs nowhere. I looked them up. Like, there's no trade programs. People need careers, things that can fall back on for pass on to their kids and stuff. A trade is forever. So that's what people need. Need trade. So we need focus on trade programs. Forget everything else. Focus on trade programs. The trade program is everything, because that's the future. That's what the kids, they don't got nobody. They can fall back on their trade. They can always go back and have something. You know what I'm saying? They need something to have. So trade is everything. Nowadays in this day and age, technology and trade, that's everything. So we need type trade programs that have different trades, technology, construction, whatever it is, art, whatever it is, a trade is, that's what we need. You know what I'm saying? So, y'all know it's real. People dying every day, people going to jail, people, because, it's nothing else to do, really. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, you're out here every day, you got problems with this person, got problems with this person, I'm bored, he was talking trash, I'm going to go take my anger on this person. I'm not even mad at these dudes, but I'm mad at something else. I'm going to take my anger on these dudes. There's nothing else to do. So it's like, I'm going to go get some money real quick. Go get some money, and then, but it's a risk. Everything's a risk. Everything you're doing, like, it's a risk every day walking out the door. So every day's a risk. That's crazy to live like that. But it's like they say, this ain't normal. It's a normal thing for us. Like, little things is normal for us. Like circling a block 2 or 3 times before you go in your house. You circle a block twice, 2 or 3 times to make sure nobody's out there for you. Nothing like that. That's normal, regular stuff. People on the outside, that's PTSD, that's PTSD, that's this, that. Yeah, whatever. Y'all call whatever. Well, what y'all doing about it? This is what we got to go through. So we grow up with what's happening. It's all these things. What's being done about it? You know what I'm saying? What's being done? Nothing is being done. Nothing is being done. Period. Every state. All this money. Going where? Or build another jail, build another college, build some other stuff that's already got stuff there that's not where it needs to be. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just crazy. When you build stuff in the urban neighborhoods, there's some negative like build, like whatever, like for instance, like marijuana is everything now. So now they're trying to like implant marijuana everywhere, build the marijuana everywhere because now it's lucrative. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, why y'all not implanting all these trade programs? Why not playing computers and construction sites and things that hands-on program? Just not for kids, bro. If kids are future, why is it not for kids? America's model, all kids, everything, kids is the future. Invest in them. Okay, there's 1,000 million kids out here in poverty that need to be invested. Where is it at? Employment period. It's tiring, saying the same thing over and over. It needs to be done. Action needs to be taken. Take action. Affirmative action. That's what needs to be taken. Affirmative action. I'm done. I don't got nothing else to say.
Absolutely, Trey.
I got nothing else to say. Period. Done talking. I got nothing to say. Y'all know what y'all doing. Y'all know what the problem is. We're saying it over and over and over and over and over. We're saying it 100 years. We're saying the same thing, really, in different words. Life's evolving, getting faster, advancing, so things is happening more. Now it's just everything's on technology and everything's on videos. Now it's out there. Now it's like, oh, it's out there. It's out there. We can't hide no more. Okay, now you can't hide to do something now. Now it's time to take action. I'm having these conversations. I'm talking to people. Do something. That's it.
Thank you, Trey. Thank you so much. And you said it all. And thank you so much for your passion and conveying that message that everyone really needs to hear. Our next panelist is going to be Gail. Gail, introduce yourself and give us your impressions of the clips from the film.
I'm
Yes, Gail is Trey's mom.
That's my mama. That's my mommy right there. Where's she at? There she go. Go ahead. I know y'all trying. Go ahead, Mom. Do your thing, Mom. As I got it from. She's gonna give y'all more party.
Hi, everyone. As you can see, it's a very emotional journey when you have your youth dying every day in your community, your friends, your family, your neighbors, people who you just know, are getting killed. And from the movie, if you heard the boys, the youth and the young men in the movie speaking, they all were looking for a better way. But they all felt like they were in a trap and like they had no other choice. They wanted more, but the only way to get it was to go outside and make do with what they had, which was given by the government, by the way, drugs and guns. That's not given to our community by us, the community. It's placed into our community by the government. So you give our children guns and drugs, and you tell them to go out to the streets and make money best way you can, and hopefully you won't get locked up before you can make it out the hood, or you won't get killed before you make it out the hood with the guns and drugs that we gave you. And if you do, you're gonna end up in jail, and we're gonna take you and lock you up for the guns and drugs that we gave you for 20, 25 years. And in the meantime, the law that we put in place for you is to lock you up. But what good did it do the community when you took 100 Black men? We're just gonna say 100, but we all know there was more. You took 100 Black men and you locked them up. But yet the community didn't change for any better. More youth continue to die, more youth continue to sell drugs, even more youth continue to get their hands on guns. Now there's mass shootings going on. Like, nothing has gotten better. So I'm gonna tag what my son said. The money is there. It needs to be spent the right way. The guns violence that needs to stop. This flooding the communities with the drugs needs to stop. The children are crying out for help. Before they get to the grave, they're crying out for help. They're crying out for help even in the grave. The blood is still on the streets. They're still crying out. Don't you hear them crying, asking for help? So the question now is, what are you gonna do? And how soon are you gonna do it? We already know what's being done in our community as far as death and drugs and things of that nature. But we're here to discuss moving forward, what we do to stop it, and how can we move forward to stop locking up the youth at such young ages and start giving them a better chance at life other than life in prison. So I'm not gonna take up too much time, but that's where I'm at. This ain't normal. So we gotta do something about it. I'm gonna pass the mic.
Next up, if he is in here, do we have Donald Osgood?
Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you can hear me pretty good. I'm out in Staten Island with my son, at the multitask. But every time I see the film, especially because I was a part of it, I think about how far we have come, but how far we need to go, and how many law changes need to happen, because a lot of the young people in this film, now they have children. And the thing that I think about most is 10 years from today, what we're dealing with. So, every time we do a screening, there's something new. Things are always happening in our community, across the country. And, we're always having the same conversations. To me, it's like we have to beg for things that we don't need to beg for, because they are just natural things that humans need, food, shelter, education, all the things that should be happening for everyone in the country that doesn't happen in the Black and brown community. So when we do these things and we're asking legislators to, make some different decisions, I think one thing that I would add today, and then I'm done, come to the community and spend some time in the community after hours, so that you can see what actually needs to happen after hours. Daytime is simple. Daytime is easy. More police out, so things don't happen the same way. But in the evening time, after everyone's gone home, to their nice houses, right, in their suburbs and things like that, come back to the inner city communities and see what's going on, so that then you understand the urgency and the cry of the people to do something different. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Donald. Next up, my predecessor, it's CFJJ. I'd like to introduce Naoka Carey. Naoka, tell us about your impressions of the clips from the film.
Sure. Thank you so much, Leon. So I come to this right now as a researcher and an advocate, working on emerging adult justice issues, but also having been an attorney for young people and a youth worker before that, and having grown up in Boston. And for me, the first thing that just screams out of the film is all of the opportunity and all of the opportunities that the young people are sort of making for themselves, where we're as a community failing them to provide those opportunities. They're still making those opportunities, and they still have all this tremendous potential. And there's just so much more that could be done in terms of investing so that young people have those opportunities in their communities, not in facilities, not through systems, but in their communities. And that really leads me to the other piece, which I think really comes out in the film, which is the failure of imagination from policymakers. And I think that all of our other speakers have really spoken to, we've got this real failure of policy in mass incarceration that you see reflected in the film. And you've got sort of a failure to imagine different. And I think and the reason I keep saying it's a failure is because we do have the models about what works and what would be better. But we haven't made those choices. And I think that's what I'm hoping we can talk about today. So I'll let other people speak.
Thank you so much, Naoka. And now we'll get to our final panelist, Armand Coleman. Armand, give us your impressions of the clips from the film.
Good evening. My name is Armand Coleman. I'm a formerly incarcerated person, and I walk in the same steps as all those youth in that film. And that led me to a life in prison, right? At the age of 17, which was always shocking to me that I was old enough to go to prison, but when I was out of prison, I wasn't old enough to do anything that an adult could do. So my impressions of the film is that, like, literally, like, you look at, and I met Trey in prison, and I kind of like grew up with him in the prison. I mean, I was older than him at the time, but I seen him grow up in the prisons. It's just shocking to me, like, when you give young people some autonomy over their own reality, how they can find solutions and grow. And the thing that stood out to me the most is, like, they telling you what they don't have. They don't have fathers. They don't have jobs. They don't have opportunities. And the line that I stood out with, and like today I'm the director of Transformational Prison Project, and the line that stood out to me because it's a line that kind of fuels the way I direct and run the organization to this day. It said, when you take somebody, you take their gun away from them, you take their gang away from them. What do you replace it with? Everybody that's on my core team, my staff, are all impact players in the streets of Boston, all gang leaders, all formerly incarcerated lifers. So the goal is that when we had to come on in a position of leadership, we had to give them a salary that was commensurate with any director in the city of Boston would get, or if not better. Or they wouldn't do it, period. I mean, I wouldn't do it, so I know they wouldn't do it, right? So if somebody told me this before I even seen this film, before I even came changed, like, listen, I'm not gonna tell you to put down your drugs, I'm not gonna tell you to put down your gun. If I could give you a job that could actually be on par with what you're getting, doing what you're doing. So I think that's what it's at. And like you said, the money's there. This is like probably one of the richest cities in the world. And we just got to get it.
Thank you so much, Armand. And so, wise words from all of our panelists. And now we're going to move into the discussion. And for my first question, I want to weave together some of the themes that our panelists mentioned: the eternal lack of imagination and solutions to problems, how it leads to mass incarceration, and really the harm that we see caused by the cycle of mass incarceration. So I'm going to direct this first question towards Gail. The film has a scene that a couple of you referenced where young people talk about how they didn't know their fathers due to their fathers being pulled into the system. And many of those young men found themselves in the same cycle of punishment and incarceration that's really been in effect since the 80s. Gail, can you elaborate on how our leaders promoting punishment as the only solution to issues in the community really hasn't helped community safety or our young people, who a lot of times are just looking for a sense of belonging?
Yes. Well, it has not helped our community, obviously, because everyone's still dying out here. Nothing. So what good did it do? It affects not just the individual who goes to prison, but it also affects the whole community, a family, the family directly, a community, neighbors, like I said, their friends who they went to school with every day who no longer see them, or, the individual themselves may not even know or understand the effect them being taken away like that and placed in a prison. And when I say taken away, it's like as a mom, I carried my son for 9 months. I gave birth to him naturally, no medicine or anything. I breastfed him, and I natured and nurtured him. And one day, a man who I don't know said, and it was done. He was taken. And that broke my heart. And I'm still trying to pick up the pieces because there were so many pieces after that that have been broken. And the effects of locking him up, locking my son up, it didn't help him any. It was not like he was receiving any education. It wasn't like he was he did get his GED in there. He did do that, but the life education, what life teaches you, he missed out on years of life, things that we may take for granted. Now that he's home, I get to see different effects, like getting up in the morning and just turning on a light switch in your house or a bedroom. That's something, that's new for him. You know what I mean? Just little things that we take for granted. So if you all can think about that, think about everything that you do. You take a shower by yourself. That's not, things is normal for us, but that doesn't happen in prison. You sleeping in your room by yourself. You normally sharing a little cell with somebody else, smelling their butts when they go to the bathroom. So everything is now different. So everything, has to take place, transition. He has to transition. So him going to prison definitely did not help him any at all. It did not help his daughter, who has now been absent without her father. She's 7. She hadn't had a birthday with her father yet. It's cause and effect, but it doesn't have to continue to go this way when now we have avenues or even money lined up for avenues that will bring better solutions to the plate. Some of the solutions that were put into place are outdated. I learned how to make preserves when I was growing up. I went and got water out of a stream, and I brought it to the yard and put it in a pot, and I scrubbed my clothes on the scrub board. There's washing machines now. So, with time, things have to change. So we need to change these laws and put into our community resources that are going to work for our children and not against our youth.
Look at that. Well said. And that's actually a perfect transition to my next question, which, Donald, I'm first going to present to you as we can talk about the need to have more services in our community and to divert our young people to those services rather than simply putting them in the system. And so, Donald, I send this question to you because I've heard you before speak so powerfully about trauma and the need for our young people to heal, which is Gail just illuminated, that isn't found in the system. So what types of interventions would you like to see young people have before they even get into the system that can really help them from going down that path?
Yeah, I'm thinking about a lot of things, Leon. And one thing that could be in place and this is a human thing, is to see our young men, our teenagers as teenagers. That's kind of like the first thing that needs to happen, because when our teens are compared to other teens, and I'm just be frank today, a black 17-year-old is still considered a man, and a white 17-year-old is considered a teen who's not fully developed. So I think one thing is really to change the conversation, just seeing them as kids, and still growing, and still, the diversion programs that are present now still pick and choose which young people that they're going to allow this opportunity, right? But all of the young people are at the same place. Some might be a little more mature or a little more advanced than others, but that's a small percentage. And when we think about, this conversation, we have to really focus on that. And I don't want to say so much the programs, Leon, today, as we've been watching this film, and as I've been living this film, I come up the same way as these young brothers. I did time. And, for me, there was no rehabilitation. It was me doing the work on myself, because, I went in kind of late, and it was a blessing. But the legislation is the real issues here, because, these laws weren't made to empower Black people. They were made to oppress Black people and empower white people. We're talking about power and money. And so we have to really, this is what I want to happen today, Leon, as we're talking. I know this is the beginning of, what you all are doing for the whole week, right? Raise the age. But I want us to really dig into the Constitution, and I'm talking more to my white colleagues today, to dig into the Constitution and really understand why it was formed and how it has negatively impacted the Black and brown community, where some families are billionaires because of it, right? And then Black families are poor because of it. So how do we empower our youth, right? Programs that teach them entrepreneurship, Trey said it earlier, trades, encouragement, more support for their mothers, because there's a lot of single mothers. There's just nothing we can do about a dead Black man, right? But empowering the moms, and then raising up other leaders in the community and empowering them to be able to support these young people. Big brothers and big sisters, they do a good job, but even in their good job, right, it's still that underlying thing that goes right back to the state house or to the White House that prohibits them from doing some of the things that need to be done to empower these youth. So those are the things that we need to talk about today, because the programs are out there, but then when they take government funding, the government funding says, hey, you can't help these types of people because of these few different things that transpire. So that's what I would like us to focus on going forward. Thank you, Leon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Donald. And Trey, you really spoke truth to power earlier, talking about the need for trades and really just more opportunities for young people. Are there other types of thinking about younger kids that are coming up right now? Are there other types of services that you didn't have when you were young and coming up that you'd like to see available for young people, teenagers and young adults who are coming through now? Let's see if we have.
He got disconnected.
Oh, I believe we Trey got disconnected, so we will hold on to that and we'll come back to that question for Trey when he's able to get back on. So now we'll pivot because Donald mentioned it, raise the age, which is a policy currently before the Massachusetts legislature. And I'm going to direct this to you now, Olga. Both raise the age as well as giving you the opportunity to share, because we are talking about issues of violence, share your research recently. So you recently engaged in some research that points out really our society's hypocrisy as it relates to the topic of guns and how the problem with guns is almost always framed as being an issue in urban areas, but you noted some interesting findings when you looked at where gun ownership is actually increasing. So can you tell us a little about that?
Sure. So with my colleague here at Boston College, we did a study looking specifically at teenagers who carry guns. And as you mentioned, there's this idea out there that it's Black and brown children who are carrying guns, that's where the real danger lies. And what we saw in our findings were that white youth are the most likely to carry, rural youth, kids in rural areas are the most likely to carry guns, and higher income youth these days are the most likely to carry guns. And those groups were increasing the fastest and were the most likely to carry. And I think, as you pointed out, that really underscores that we have this huge double standard in who we consider to be dangerous. And we have this huge double standard in terms of how we approach gun violence. So with white youth, we often see this issue around, we'll see the conversation pivot immediately to mental health issues or to trauma, as opposed to punitive mass incarceration, sort of let's lock everybody up, let's add surveillance and policing as the response, which is what we see often in urban communities and with Black and brown youth. And so I think that we know that those kinds of responses are actually counterproductive. And so, but I think that we really need to address the double standard around how we think about guns and sort of who our public imagination imagines as dangerous, and what guns are what's going on. And I don't know if there's a question, but I'm happy to answer questions, but I'm going to move to a little bit. I can also talk a little bit about the experience in other countries with Raise the Age and sort of where that came from, if that's helpful.
Absolutely. So as we're looking at Raise the Age here in Massachusetts, talk a bit about the approach that other countries are taking to young people who are making the challenging transition to adulthood and navigating some of the traps that Gail mentioned earlier. How do other countries really look at that 18 to 20-year-old population?
Right. So I was lucky enough to get to go and tour the German justice system in 2018, actually with a bunch of legislators from here in Massachusetts. Germany, like a number of other countries in Europe, actually includes young people all the way up to 21, and some other countries all the way up to 25 in their juvenile justice systems. And for Germany, the reason that they did that, they've been doing that since the 50s. And it was because you had a lot of young people whose neighborhoods had really been devastated and who had lost parents, who were orphans. And so in Germany, they talked about the fatherless generation and how they really needed to support them better. And that was why they ensured that their juvenile justice system would include young people up until 21, was to really sort of, these young people need our support. And I think that there's a parallel, right, when we're talking about a mass incarceration and we're talking about a bunch of young people who've lost parents, right? We have had millions of children in the United States affected by parental incarceration, and that's both fathers and mothers. But it was a massive expansion where we ×5 quintupled the prison population in the United States. And so now we see our young people sort of dealing with and inheriting that failed policy and what that meant. And so I think in terms of thinking about why Raise the Age really makes sense here in Massachusetts, I think it's the same kind of thing where we can support our young people. We know that these approaches that are fostered on sort of building on their strengths and building on all of the opportunities that they will take advantage of if we make sure that they're there. That's the right approach, is sort of thinking about how we can respond and not sort of going with these, I don't know, sort of consistent policy failures that we've been following for too many years.
Absolutely. Thank you, Naoka. And before we leave this topic, I want to pivot and Armand, have you chime in. As you mentioned, you had the experience of going into the adult system at 17, back before the first raise the age, when 17-year-olds were tried as an adult in Massachusetts. How do you believe your life would have been different if you were treated as a juvenile at 17 instead of as an adult? And, how would extending, juvenile treatment for 18, 19, and 20-year-olds how do you believe that would have a favorable impact on our youth right now?
Thank you, Leon. I would say that I have to give you a brief overview of how my transition through the system happened, right? I came in at 17. I was 6 months over 17. I was one of the first people incarcerated in National Street Jail. Actually, the cell I went in was brand new, never lived in when I went in there. Within 6 months, now remember, I'm the youngest person in the prison, actually. I don't even think there was nobody in there younger than me at the time. Maybe a couple, but they weren't on the same level I was on, because I was in the high security unit. And I'm going in there with a lot of traumas and a lot of insecurities already. So that there was maybe, it only made me it made me kind of hyper vigilant in defending myself because of my insecurities. And within 6 months, I was the first person ever placed on administrative segregation in National Street. And I stood in there for 7 months until I was transferred upstate to Walpole as an 18-year-old. Again, the youngest person in the prison. And within 2 years, I was arrested again for homicide in the prison, and I spent a decade in segregation. So it's no way, it's like to say how my transition would have been different. And not only that, after that, I ended up spending 2 more years in the STG unit, security threat unit, then the rest, another 10 years in maximum security. That's where I met Trey and all of that. But the first 20 years of my incarceration was literally dead time. I changed in incarceration, but it had nothing to do with incarceration. It wasn't until 20 years into my sentence where I realized that I actually was traumatized, that I actually got involved in restorative justice. And it wasn't a program that the system created. It was a program that the men created in the prison, the organization that I'm now at the head of. And we say, yo, we got a problem. We need healing, and we created our own programming to bring ourselves healing and the healing to thousands of others in the system as well. Now, if I don't went through the juvenile system, first of all, I'm going to just say I went 20 years without even touching anybody, right? I went 20 years without even being offered any services or anything. The first services of any type of mental health, forensic expert at all I got was when they passed a law in Massachusetts saying that youthful offenders should be afforded access to forensic experts, right? Or the best possible opportunity at parole. And that was the first time I ever got any type of humanizing experience from anybody beyond the wall. And to raise the age thing is to me is pertinent, because I think when Massachusetts passed this, I was 17 when I committed my crime. When Massachusetts applied Miller versus Alabama, they said anybody under the age of 18 now qualifies as a youthful offender, and they will get the services. So my point I'm making is if I was treated as a youthful offender and I was sent to a juvenile facility, my trajectory would have been totally different. I'd have had access to family, I'd have had access to resources, I'd have had access to education, all of which did not exist in the environments that I was in. And I wouldn't have been so insecure. Honestly, I was just afraid. I was scared. And so I told myself when I was younger, if I'm scared, I'm not gonna back down. I'm gonna attack the problem. And that's how I ended up living my first decades in prison. And it literally I ain't gonna say it ruined my life because I survived it, right? I got through it. But it changed the trajectory of my life, and it just took me out of rotation of my own family and everybody for a long time. So thank you for the question, Leon.
No, thank you so much. And then for really our final question of our panel, I really want to hone in on one of the parts of the film that was most impactful and powerful for me. And it gets into the importance of helping young men who've been in the system reintegrate back into society, but also on the topic of the policy of expungement. It's the scene in the movie where you see a young man talking to his mentor, really navigating his first job, and then possibly bridging and getting involved with trades. There's research out there from the University of Minnesota that established that completing school, getting a job, and starting a career are the most important milestones that lead young people to leave offending behavior alone and then move forward into more productive adulthood. But yet a juvenile or criminal record can really undermine this goal. So first I'll hand it back to you, Armand, but give other panelists a chance to chime in. Talk about how the ability to expunge offenses from a record could really benefit a young person looking to build a career and just make a better life.
I will say I'm in a unique position where I'm not even gonna get into that, but I think it means a lot. Like I just this month or last month at the Transformation of Prison Project started a program for youthful offenders. Everybody who committed a crime under the age of 18 who benefited from our program while incarcerated are enrolled in our programming, right? So and the need that they express that they need that's top of line is financial literacy, mental health services, and just being able to like just branch out into fields that they can't branch out into, right? So getting some type of support around getting entry into those fields, and it's mostly because of our criminal history or. But the thing I'm saying is that like if you raise the age, right? If they raise the ages they have and they qualify the men and women as youthful offenders, I don't see why their records are still like following them, period. And beyond that, most youthful offenders that I know who serve time and who are out are lifers. So I mean, I don't even believe that a lifetime parole should be following them for life. I mean, I'm almost 50 years old this next year. I can't even leave the state without permission. I can't even execute my duty as executive the way I want to execute it because of this thing that keeps following me for something that I committed as a child. So I mean, I think it'd be like very liberating because you don't feel that you ever going to be able to live as an adult if you still have the inabilities to be an adult. Period. Everybody's done something as a child they wish they didn't do, but not everybody's being forever like judged by it, if you will. So, I mean, we got somebody on the call today, Tim Dill. He had to fight to get his real estate license for a crime that he committed as a child. We got people that want to on our team that wants to advance to other fields that I know they would be great at because they was experts at it on the other side of the wall. And they can't advance into it because of the barrier that's created because of their criminal record as children. I mean, if you recognize them as children and you're saying it's a child offense, there's no way you should be making that follow somebody into their 40s and 50s. It just makes no sense. And I'm just like proud of all. I'm gonna just say one thing. I want to say I'm proud of all the guys that I know that come home who are youthful offenders. Who benefited from youthful offender advancements in the law here, but it's a lot more to be done. It's a lot more to be done, and it's a lot of things that's holding people back from realizing their true potential. If somebody goes this far, gets this far, and making such strides, it serves no benefit to us or society to not have them have their full citizenship returned to them. Period.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Armand. And just in general, can we just give a big round of applause for our panelists just for coming and just sharing, you know, just from the heart, just so much that we were able to hear. So we're going to open it up now for Q&A. We'll take questions from all of you who are in attendance, and then we'll give our panelists an opportunity to, you know, kind of have the final word before we move on into some action steps. So I see Talisha, you have a question.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Talisha Gilliard. So I am looking forward to watching the whole documentary. I had seen it around social media a little bit, and I was 6 when my dad went to prison. He was sentenced to 10 years. So it was great to hear about the, not great, but it was interesting to hear about the 1996 sweep that went on, because I lost my dad in that, and so that was just awesome to see. So my mom's from Mission Hill. My dad is from, I'm drawing a blank. My dad is from over there by Jackson. And so my question is, and also I have an uncle, he was sentenced to he was found guilty of 2nd-degree murder with the possibility of parole, but he has a lifetime parole type of thing. And he's been released 3 different times, and 3 different times he's been violated on his parole after he's found the job. So he's about to be re-released. So it's nice to see other people who have, and he was 17 when he went away. You know, other people doing work in the community that maybe he can get hooked up with. I'm sure he knows some people that's on the panel. And okay, so my question is, when it comes to Second Amendment rights, right? And how it's historically, gun legislation has unfairly targeted Black communities, where is the happy middle ground? Because I have had family who has been, you know, have their lives taken due to gun violence. I have some family who's doing 25 to life for gun violence, and friends as well. But what doesn't sit well with me is stricter gun laws or more gun laws. I think if I'm correct here in Massachusetts, you can go get your gun license at 15, you know, which requires like training and gun safety classes and all that great stuff. And I remember being 15 or 16 and my friends started getting arrested for having guns, you know, and I don't think any of them had shot anyone or killed anyone, but just simply carrying the firearm was a violation. They're doing 15 or better right now. And it just doesn't sit well with me in a community. And not to diminish, you know, people having fell victim to, you know, guns, but it doesn't sit well with me as a community member having the police with guns and not the people in the community without guns. I mean, and the people in the community without guns, if that makes any sense. And I think I thought about, I'm wrapping it up, but I thought about when that massacre happened in Buffalo. And I guess now looking back, I'm kind of embarrassed, but I'm just going to keep it 360. I thought to myself, if that was Mattapan, Dorchester, Roxbury, it's no way that 18-year-old man would have been able to go somewhere and shoot up a grocery store and, you know, take out people's grandparents, because allegedly there are, you know, some legal guns in the community and there are some illegal guns in the communities. But I just don't think he would have got that far. And I hear,
Lisa,
you know,
let me pause you right here, because I want to grab on you. You've given us a lot to chew on right there. And Nyoka, why don't I direct that to you? So a couple of the themes that I'm hearing is really just that, again, getting back to that hypocrisy about gun ownership, guns fundamentally being seen as tools of criminality in communities of color, while being seen as tools of freedom and identity in white communities, and how that disparate viewpoint, but how do we navigate that in looking at policy change?
Perfect, thank you.
Thanks, Leon. I mean, I think that what people who do research on gun violence will say is that the punitive, the sort of more gun laws, more prosecution is not getting us to safer. But there are sort of public health strategies that are much more effective and underlying the root causes, right? This is what the Mass Coalition is working on, is underlying root causes of gun violence. And maybe Ruth, if you want to jump into that I think there is a way of sort of both acknowledging that there can be responsible gun ownership, that responsible gun ownership is about responsibility, not about your skin color, right? It's not, and that we have this incredibly racist double standard about gun carriage and gun ownership, and that we need to address sort of underlying root causes around violence and address those. And I think that, there is the way that we use the criminal justice system only for certain kinds of gun possession is part of the problem, right? Like the studies on racial disparities that came out of the Massachusetts courts, gun possession was one of the areas where there were the worst racial disparities. And so I think that sort of, we can have both those conversations. It sometimes feels like we're only having one conversation or another, but I think we can have both, and we can recognize that, more gun laws, sort of figuring out, and we can also look at sort of like cutting out sort of the flow of guns into communities and sort of reducing the potential for harm, because young people of color also have increasing suicide rates, also have increasing, like there's a bunch of things around guns that are concerning, but not, both gun violence and about suicide and around unintentional injuries. And we can sort of talk about what works, but what generally doesn't work is a lot of prosecution and a lot of locking everybody up. That's not addressing the underlying root causes. And I know the Second Amendment is a whole different conversation.
Yes.
And I was like, well, we could do a different panel about that, but I'm like, we can talk about we can have many conversations about guns, so.
Absolutely. So we've got Ruth Zacharin, Executive Director of the Mass Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence. Jump on in here, Ruth. Are there any thoughts that you have relative to Talicia's question and sort of navigating those separate elements and looking at policy reform?
Yeah, well, first I just want to say thank you to Talicia for raising the question. It's actually the reason why the coalition approached CFJJ to partner and to do some learning together. So I want to first acknowledge that gun legislation has vastly contributed to mass incarceration. So I think we need to acknowledge that as a baseline for how we move forward and see the harm that's already been caused by legislation that was supposed to protect us from guns, but actually caused so much harm in so many other ways. And so our partnership is really about how do we move forward with policymaking and practices that reduce both the flow and access to guns in communities without continuing to augment the criminal legal system. And there's a lot to be said around what that looks like, and I won't take up any more time now because I do feel like that's a whole other panel discussion. But I did want to acknowledge that as a baseline for our philosophy and how we think about our legislative advocacy and why we're so grateful to have this partnership with CFJJ and others on the screen so that we can be in constant conversation around what that looks like.
And Donald, I saw your hand was up, so I wanted to give you an opportunity to hop in relative to Talicia's question as well.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, again, the language is what a lot of this stuff is about too, because if young Black men are considered super predators and all the other things that are continuously put out there, even when President Biden did his gun address a couple of weeks ago, it sounded like he kind of made some edits to an old speech to me when I was listening, where he was trying to be careful what he was saying, right? And you have people like him and others in positions that continuously, perpetrate those same laws to have the same outcomes, right? And then as I'm thinking about it on the flip side, our communities, you go to prison, you allegedly serve your, you know, your time and pay your debt to society, but then that thing hovers over black men and women more because it's a continuous obstacle for us, right? So even as we're talking about raising the age and, you know, expungement for youth, it just needs to be something in place where once you've done what you needed to do, that's it. So that you can come back to society and do what you need to do. And especially for our young people, they don't need to have that experience when it's something that, you know, others get an opportunity to have that redirection where we don't get that same opportunity. One mistake and that's it, where others might get 25 mistakes.
Absolutely. Thank you, Donald. And then before we pivot and move to any other questions, Talisha, I'll simply add, we have to be very honest in these conversations about racism and how it drives presumptions and how the ownership and possession of guns in Black communities are never framed, you know, from the perspective of safety, but in white communities, they are always framed through the view of safety and individual rights. And so that racism and that perception largely drives it. But are any other questions? Soledad, please jump in.
Hi, everyone. My name is Soledad Valenciano, and I have the privilege of being board president at Citizens for Juvenile Justice. I'm also an attorney. I do a lot of juvenile defense work. And as I was watching the film and listening to the narrative, especially some of the young people, and speaking about not having a father in the home and the lack of opportunities and almost this disconnect with their communities, I thought a lot about the teens that I've been working with in the community in which I live. And a lot of them are newcomers, Latino newcomers to the States, coming in at 15, 16, 17, a lot of them without a family, coming here on their own, and a lot of times finding this disengagement that causes them a lot of times to not really connect with the school. And so they end up dropping out. And so I guess my question is, I would love for this to be in Spanish, if there was some way to have subtitles that I could present that to the people that I work with. But also, how do we bring together these two communities that I feel have so much shared experience and are also seen in such a negative light, and yet need so much support and help, especially, like I said, a lot of these young people that are here without a parent, trying to survive, trying to navigate this world, who came here looking for a dream and are finding it not what they envisioned and not what they thought. So my question is to some of the filmmakers, the collaboration, is there collaboration with other communities, such as the Latino community, its newcomer community, immigrant community? Thank you.
Wonderful question. And honestly, I'll open that up to our panelists, even the neighborhoods, you know, where, you know, they were the subject of the film. You know, we have longstanding members of the community and we have immigrant communities as well. How do you all feel about that need for collaboration there? So any of our panelists, Gail, Armand, Donald, please feel free to jump in.
Well, there's definitely a need for the collaboration, and that is a part of what we're doing now by holding these screenings about the film. We're inviting policymakers, lawmakers, people who are in high positions, business owners, community activists, neighbors, schools, everyone. We're asking everyone to come take a part in listening to the film, take a part of the audience where you can ask questions. And that is one of the ways we're trying to bridge the gap by doing these screenings. So we also, like, at the end, we'll tell people, you know, there is a way and where you would like for a screening to happen, you can inform one of us and we could try to set that up at the earliest date. If you know locations where you think a screening could happen, let us know. And that's one of the way we're here to help bridge that gap.
Thank you. That's excellent. Thank you.
Absolutely. And again, I encourage everyone, please consider watching the film in its entirety, sharing information about the film. And yes, great point, Gail. Using this film as an opportunity to kick off these sorts of conversations in different communities, even outside of Boston, is very important. So are there any other questions before we move on to sort of our wind down? All right, seeing none at this point, I'm just going to pass the microphone back to each of our just phenomenal panelists and just say, is there anything else you want this audience to hear and really understand that maybe you didn't get a chance to speak to today? So Gail, I'll start with you.
Well, I would want them to know that the documentary that they watched was just that, a documentary. It was not a movie. Those were not actors and actresses. Those are real people. This is real life. And those real people are crying out for help. It makes no sense. Can you see my shirt?
Yes, we can.
That lives are being lost every other day in the community. That is, it's not normal. So we shouldn't be going to the graves, burying children. We should be going to graduations at this time of year. Kids are supposed to be graduating right now, birthdays and all type of things. And it just has to stop. And it's time that we start holding not just the youth accountable for their actions, but we need to start holding the policymakers and the ones holding the funds accountable. Like, we need to start holding them accountable and making them spend the money in the areas that is needed. And that goes on to another subject, which means I'm starting to change the votes. So if you've been in the House for too many years and I've been seeing things get worse, I'm not voting for you. And I have a lot of people in my community that back me. So we're not voting for you all. It's time for some change. And that's what I would like for the people to leave with. It's time for change.
Thank you, Gail. Thank you. Donald, what's the final word from you?
Yeah. Final words. I got a lot of stuff, but I'm gonna try to narrow this in, right? You know, Gail touched on something about the funding. I think unrestricted funding needs to happen because, you know, restricted funding only impacts our community, you know, and I feel like that's just another tool of white supremacy to keep families that need, you know, what they need in this particular little box that still controls how they move or not move. You know, other thing I would say is really work on that language. You know, let's even, I saw, I think it was Josh put in the chat about the gang database, right? If we continue to call the Black and brown young people gang members, right, then there'll always be a need for something like that. But if we start to, you know, call them what they are, young teenagers, you know, who need some guidance because they need the same guidance as the white kids. It just needs to happen. It just needs to be fair across the board. And once it's fair across the board, a lot of these other things will change. You know, and then back to that 13th Amendment. You know, if we don't tear it up, tear up the Constitution and rewrite it, you know, we're in a total different place, right? But when you see when you see folks who say, let's make America great again, right? What they're really saying is we want to go back to the slave days. And so if we don't get that mindset out of the country, then we're going to continue to have these types of conversations. There'll be a new documentary in 10 years, you know, and it'll just be this vicious cycle, you know. And my last point, you know, for Talisha, you know, yeah, the 90s, the early 90s, they wiped out our community. You know, we wiped it out, selling drugs, killing one another. And then they came in and swooped in and took the rest of the men out of the community, because that's how you destroy any community. You take the men out. So I want you to know, I don't know if I know your father. I probably do know your pops, right? But we didn't have a lot of options back then. And we worked with the hand we were dealt. You know, I was one who tried to get a job all the time, and I just wasn't getting jobs. And that's before a criminal record. So, you know, crack cocaine was easier to get, easier to sell. So just changing some things, tearing up some things, unrestricted funds. That's my closeout.
Thank you, Donald. Thank you. Armand, what is your final word for the people?
Yeah, I would like to express two things, right? I often hear like how people say, I mean, this is nothing to you, Naoka. Like how Germany and them are advanced in their laws and their prison systems. And it's simply, for me, is that the people who run the system look like the people that are in their systems. The difference with us here is that most of the people they're locking up are people who look like me, and the people who are in power are people that don't look like me. So it's easier for them to have extreme punishments, extreme systems. I mean, for me, that I think that's what fuels their progressive, if you will, positionings. And the second thing I want to add, 'cause I say this all the time, like I would say an immediate victim of that whole super predator rhetoric, right? I grew up in New York City. I remember the Central Park case in the 80s. That fueled every evolution of criminal law to like just treat youth as adults. Right. So everybody used that. They held up that case, and 20 years later they found out that people didn't even do it. The teenagers didn't even do it, and no laws are made to reverse that. And I never heard nobody speak to it. So I don't even know why we're arguing about why we're not raising the age. We raise the age of every state damn near based upon a false premise that youthful offenders or children committed a crime that didn't even happen. But now when it was proven that they didn't do it, it's like it has nobody saying anything to speak that it should be reversed. So, and the last thing I would say is that we already have the solutions here. Donald said it best, and that's what we're doing here at the Transformational Prison Project. We're just advocating. We're not even, most of the money we get doesn't even come from this state. It's coming from all the way on the other coast. Listen, this is what we're doing over here. This is what we want money to do, and they're giving it to us. They're giving it to us unrestricted, and they believe that the people closest to the problem are the people who have the ability to do the solutions. And I think that's the best thing you could do. Just like I'm gonna just back up a little bit. When we started the Transformation of Prison program, we kind of like reversed the paradigm of programming in the prison. The programming in the prison was that the people who were the least encourageable, and those who were like the quickest to go home, who weren't lifer, who weren't violent offenders, those would be the ones who get the programming first, right? We did it the other way around. Like, no. People who are considered the top gang members, people who are considered the most incorrigible, those are the ones that we targeted for our programming first, because we knew everybody on the streets listened to them. We knew everybody in the prisons would listen to them. And that was our recipe for our success. Just to give you an antidote of why it's not working. The people who are not in the problem are doing it the reverse of people who are in the way the people who are in the problem would do it. So yeah, I'll end with that.
Thank you, Armand. And Naoka, what is your final word for all of our folks here today?
So I think it's many things. I mean, I would agree with you, Armand, in terms of why we have such a hard time making change in the United States versus some other places. But I will also say that when we raise the age, so I was involved in raising our first, I'm calling it our first raise the age, because we're going to have another raise the age, but the first raise the age in 2013, and doing a bunch of those policy reforms, that there was definitely a like Chicken Little, the sky is falling, now's not a good time, all sorts of excuses. But crime went down after we raised the age. Like, it's not we know what will work, and we also have to not be discouraged by these sort of like quick sort of the hyper kind of the falsehoods and the other things that get thrown out when people are trying to stop change and progress. And so I just would sort of, I think everybody on this call is like ready to go, but I think that we can definitely, that is not, we can do this, and we don't need to be sort of distracted by these sort of constant stream of like, we can't do it right now, crime will definitely go up, we can't do it. Because we know that it actually has a positive effect, and we've seen it work here in Massachusetts.
Thank you all. And just quickly, just wanted to state that Trey, who was with us earlier, has some difficulties remaining online, but I will just end on this. There was the powerful words that Trey said about the need to get young people opportunities, but more important was how he said it. And that power and that sense of urgency and that call to action that really matters just as much. And in light of that, I'm now going to hand this over to both Senna and Ruth. We didn't come here just to talk. We came here to really spin this towards action. And this is only the first day of our Juneteenth week of action. So Senna and Ruth, why don't you talk a bit about some of the other events we have coming up over the course of the next week?
Thanks so much, Leon, and thanks to everyone who's participated in the panel today, and to Rudy and Coach for bringing this amazing film to all of us. Just speaking personally, I've had the honor of working with everyone on these screenings, and every time I watch clips from the film, and every time I get to participate in one of these panel discussions, I not only learn, but I grow and I think about new things. And I just want to appreciate all of you for giving me the opportunity to do that. So my charge right now is to talk a little bit about action steps and some of the policies that we think will make a difference in preventing gun violence and preventing the trauma of gun violence. One policy that I want to highlight, which is something the coalition has been working on very deliberately during this legislative session, is something called the Crime Gun Data Analysis Bill. The idea with this bill is we want to understand how the guns that are coming into our communities are getting there to begin with. When we talked with our member organizations, one of the priorities that they identified was stopping the flow of guns into communities. This bill would compel the state to do a better, more regular and thorough job of analyzing the trace data that comes from guns that are recovered after a shooting, or in community in general. And with an analysis of that data, we can better understand where the guns are originating from and make better policy to address the trafficking of guns into communities. This bill is currently still live. We are trying to move it forward and to make sure that it comes to a full floor vote. If you would like to take action, the bill is H2437, S1562. We'll put information in the chat about it. It's also in the program. What we're asking for folks to do is to contact their legislators and have their legislators contact both Senate and House Ways and Means, which is where the bill is living, to encourage Senate and House Ways and Means to move the bill forward so we can get this past the finish line. And now I'll turn it over to Sana.
Thank you, Ruth, and thank you to all of you for staying on. I know we're a little over. We talked about the themes. So the three themes of today were prevention, intervention, and reintegration, right? So that is sort of like and we talked about what's wrong and our vision of what different would look like. Different is not going to happen by itself. If we just talk amongst ourselves, it's not going to change because we don't have the power to make the change. it's policy makers and elected officials who make the change. So for today, my plea to all of you is take your message, take your passion to the next step. Your elected officials need to know this. And we have the vehicles, we have the tools that they can do to move it forward. So Ruth talked about the crime data analysis bill. There's also for prevention, there is a bill about diversion. Donald talked about how young people of color are less likely to benefit from being diverted from the legal system than white young people. That is not fair. There are reasons that happening. So we have that legislation to try to address some of those reasons to expand diversion opportunities. The second bill is around raise the age. That is honestly the most controversial of this entire package. And we need the biggest push, that because people are scared. Same as Naka said, the sky's gonna fall, not gonna fall, but we need to, legislators need to hear, like, if I vote for this, I'm not gonna lose my job as an elected official. They need to hear from you. And the third is around expungement and reintegration. Getting young people back on track. The issue of records has been a big barrier for full reintegration. Let's get that passed as well. So what I'm going to do is, rather than go into the details of that bill, I'm going to invite you to our next event. So this is an entire event, a week of actions with Juneteenth centered around it. So we're going to be, our next event is going to be a Tuesday, June 21st, 4 p.m. It will also be a Zoom event like today. We will have, it will be a training. So like, what does this mean? I want to talk to my elected officials, but I've never done it. I don't know what these bills are. I'll say something, I don't know what it means. This is what that time is for. We will talk about what those bills are. You will have an opportunity to practice how to meet with legislators, and you will have fun doing it. And you will say, oh, that was so much fun. I want to do it in for real life, which will be the next day, which will be June 22nd. We are starting our event at 11 o'clock. It can be at the State House or from wherever you want to be. We will be meeting at the 4th floor cafeteria at the State House. We'll be going as a group, and we'll be knocking on doors at legislators and say, we want you to pass these bills. Not everybody can come and make it to Boston at the State House. So we're going to be asking folks, if you cannot make it, use that time, come in at 11 o'clock from your computer, from your phone, call your legislators, and we'll have a script on this event website to say, this is how you find them, what to say. Literally, if you spend 1 minute on a phone call or an email saying, these are the 3 bill numbers or 4 bill numbers, and I support this, that's literally all they need to hear from you. It is not a heavy lift for you, but it's a tremendous push to our legislators. So I invite you to please join us for those events. I'm going to hand it off to Leon to sign us all off.
That is the call to show up and show out on behalf of our young people to really drive home this change that we've talked about today. And in conclusion, I want to thank again just Rudy and Coach for just again bringing this amazing film into the community. Another big thank you to all of our panelists just for sharing part of yourselves and your experiences and what you've been through. And again, this is only the start. We look forward to seeing you all at these other events during our week of action. Thank you all so much.
Thank you all.